Nobody found the dragon. The dragon found them. It started with a supply crate. Crate number 7 Delta, third row from the back of the cargo bay, sealed tight and stamped with the label of a salvage company that no longer existed. The crate had bounced between 4 different freight ships before landing on Oran 9 research station. Nobody had opened it because nobody had ordered it. It just appeared, the way unwanted things sometimes do. Darian Cole was the one who noticed the crate breathing. He had been walking through the cargo bay on his way to the lab, half awake, holding a drink that had gone cold. He stopped. He looked at the crate. The sides of the metal box were moving, very slightly, in and out, like lungs. He set his drink down on a nearby shelf and opened the crate. Inside, curled into the tightest ball a small body could make, was a baby dragon. She was the size of a large dog. Her scales were golden green, the color of sunlight through new leaves. Her wings were folded so tightly against her sides that they looked like crumpled paper. Her eyes were shut. Her breathing was shallow and slow, but it was there. Darian stood very still for a moment. Then he went and got Director Voss. Voss took one look and said, "That is a Drakari hatchling." "Yes," Darian said. "Get it off my station." "She," Darian said. Voss looked at him. "What?" "She. I think she is a she, and I am not sure where you would like me to take her." That was how Darian Cole became the unofficial caretaker of a baby Drakari in Quarantine Bay 4. The rest of the station responded the way most species respond to Drakari, with immediate, instinctive fear. The Velhari technician who worked the cargo bay requested a transfer to a different section. The 2 Murith scientists in the biology wing started wearing additional protective gear every time they passed the quarantine corridor. Even Voss kept her visits short and her distance long. Drakari were known across the galactic compact as the oldest and most dangerous intelligent species alive. Nobody wanted to be near one, not even a very small one with crumpled wings. Darian was not afraid. This surprised him a little. He had worked with difficult species before, and he had learned that fear was usually about what a creature might do. Looking at this hatchling, who had not moved, had not eaten, had not made a single sound in 3 days, all he felt was a kind of quiet concern. She was alone. She had been in that crate for a long time, and whatever she had come from, it had not been good. He did not try to talk to her at first. He did not bring food and hold it out the way you would to a stray animal. He did not shine lights at her or scan her from across the room. He pulled a chair into the corner of the quarantine bay, a reasonable distance away, and he sat down and opened his data tablet and worked. He did this every day. The first day, she did not move. The second day, she opened one eye. It was gold. Deeply, purely gold, like something molten. It looked at him for a long moment and then closed again. The third day, he came in and found that she had moved. Not much. A few feet. She was still in the corner, still curled in a tight ball, but she was facing him now instead of facing the wall. He noted this in his log. He did not make a big thing of it. He just sat down in his chair and went back to work. Voss stopped him in the corridor that evening. "Any progress?" she asked. "Some," he said. "How long is this going to take?" Darian thought about it. "As long as it takes," he said. Voss pressed her lips together. The Galactic Compact office sent a notice. A Drakari hatchling unaccounted for in compact space triggers an automatic alert. Someone is going to come looking for her. "Then we should make sure she is healthy before they arrive," Darian said. Voss did not look satisfied with this answer, but she did not argue with it, which he had learned was as close as she came to agreement. He went back to the quarantine bay that night. He was not supposed to be there that late. He just wanted to check. She was still there, still curled up, but her eyes were open now, both of them, and they were watching him with an attention that made him stop in the doorway. He had worked with a lot of animals, a lot of non-human species. He knew the difference between an animal watching you because you were a possible threat and something else watching you because it was trying to figure out what you were. This was the second thing. He pulled his chair a little closer than usual. Not close enough to crowd her, just close enough to matter. "Bad week," he said quietly. Not a question. She did not answer. Of course she did not. Drakari hatchlings were known to be verbal from birth, but she had not made a sound since they found her. He opened his tablet. "I am going to read my notes out loud," he said. "You do not have to listen, but the bay is quiet, and I find it helps me think." He started reading. She did not move, but she did not look away. By the time he left that night, She was 3 feet closer to where he had been sitting than she had been when he arrived. He wrote that down too. Sora started following Darien to breakfast on the 14th day. He had not named her. The name came from the station cook, a broad-shouldered woman named Petra, who had glanced through the quarantine bay window one morning, seen the small golden-green dragon sitting beside Darien with her tail curled neatly around her feet, and said, "She looks like a Sora to me." Nobody argued. Sora stuck. The following part was simple and strange. Darien walked to the canteen. Sora walked behind him, close enough that her nose nearly touched the back of his knee. Every other person in the corridor stopped, pressed against the wall, and stared. Sora did not look at them. She looked at Darien's heels. He got his food. He sat down. She sat under the table. Petra watched this from behind the serving counter for a long moment. Then she quietly put a raw protein block on the floor near the table leg, stepped back, and went to work on something else. She did not make eye contact with the dragon. She did not say anything about it. She just put the food there and moved on. Sora ate it when nobody was looking. That became the arrangement. Life on the station restructured itself around the small dragon who had moved in without asking. The Velhari technician came back from the other section but refused to use the corridor outside Darien's lab before midday, which she stated was when the dragon was least active. The Murith scientists removed their extra gear after Darien wrote them a calm, thorough note explaining that a Drakari hatchling separated from her clutch had no venomous capacity until the second growth stage. They read the note. They removed the gear. They still walked very fast past the lab door. Sora never spoke. Not a word. Not to anyone. This was the thing people found most unsettling. Drakari were verbal creatures, known for it. They used language the way other species used tools, precisely, intentionally, with full awareness of what words could build or break. A Drakari that did not speak was like a fire that did not burn. It made people nervous in a way they could not quite name. Darien thought about this. He wrote about it in his log. She is not incapable of speech. Her throat structures are fully formed. She responds to language. I can see her processing what people say. She is choosing not to speak. He did not push. He kept talking to her the way he always had, in a low, even voice, sharing whatever was on his mind. Today's atmospheric readings. A problem he was having with a sample analysis. The fact that the station's water filtration unit was making a noise again that maintenance claimed was normal and Darien found personally unconvincing. Sora listened. He was sure of it. What he started to notice, around the third week, was the tail. When he said something correct, a conclusion that matched the data, a reading he had done right, her tail would rest still. When he said something wrong, or made an assumption that had a gap in it, the tail would tap. Slowly, once or twice, against the floor or the bench or whatever surface she happened to be on. He tested it, carefully, without making a performance of it. He started making small, deliberate errors in his reasoning when he read his notes aloud. Small things. The kind of thing that could be a genuine mistake. Every time, the tail tapped. He wrote this in his log too. She is not just listening. She is following the logic. She understands the work. He stopped telling himself she was an animal in distress that had found a safe person. He started treating her the way you treat a colleague who has decided not to talk for reasons of their own. He pulled a second chair to his workbench. She used it by the end of the week. She sat on it with her wings folded and her head tilted at the kind of angle that meant she was reading his data screen along with him. And when he made a mistake in his notation that evening, she reached out one small claw and tapped the exact line where the error was. He stared at the screen, then at her. She looked back at him with those enormous gold eyes. Right, he said. Thank you. She turned back to the screen. He fixed the notation. The other thing he noticed was the disappearing. 2 or 3 times a week, at unpredictable hours, Sora would simply not be where she had been. She would be gone for 2 or 3 hours. He would find her later in a maintenance corridor, or a storage room at the far end of the station, or once, behind a wall panel in a section that was supposedly sealed for repairs. She would be sitting alone, perfectly still. She always looked, when he found her, like she had just finished something. He did not follow her. He did not put a tracker on her. He wrote in his log, regular private intervals. Consistent behavior, not erratic. She is not hiding from anything in the station. She is doing something she needs to do alone. This is a choice. He left it there. On the night of the 26th day, Petra stopped him near the canteen and said, "That little dragon looks at you different from how she looks at everybody else." "Different how?" he asked. Petra thought about it. "Like you are the only solid thing in the room," she said. Darian went back to the lab and sat with that for a while. Sora was already there, sitting on her chair, watching him with those gold eyes that always seemed to hold more than they were supposed to. He picked up his tablet. "Let me show you what I found in today's soil samples," he said. Her tail settled still. He started talking. The ship arrived without warning, which was the first problem. Official vessels filed approach notices 24 hours in advance. It was compact law. This one simply appeared at the edge of Orin 9 sensor range and sent a single short transmission. Drakari, Interstellar Authority. Official retrieval. Prepare for docking. Voss read the message 3 times. Then she called Darian. "They are here for her," she said. He was already looking at Sora. She was sitting on her chair at his workbench. Something had changed in her posture the moment the alert chimed across the station comms. A tightening, a stillness that was different from her usual calm. She had heard the transmission. He did not know how much she understood. He suspected it was all of it. "How long until they dock?" he asked. 40 minutes. He looked at Sora. Her eyes were fixed on the wall. Her tail was pressed flat against the chair leg. He had never seen her do that before. "All right," he said. The envoy's name was Arathon, and he was everything a full-grown Drakari was supposed to be. He was enormous. He filled the docking corridor the way a storm fills a valley, completely, with no room left over for anything else. His scales were deep blue-black, and they caught the station lights in a way that made them look less like scales and more like the edge of something very sharp. He moved slowly, deliberately, and every person in the corridor found a reason to be somewhere else within 30 seconds of his arrival. Voss met him at the dock. She was the only one who stayed, and Darian thought she deserved some kind of recognition for that, because Arathon looked at her the way a mountain looks at a stone. "The hatchling," Arathon said. His voice was low, even, and seemed to arrive slightly before the sound itself. "Where is she?" "Xenobiology lab," Voss said. "Section C. I will take you." Darian was waiting in the lab when they arrived. He had not moved Sora. He had not told her to do anything. He had just waited, sitting in his chair, while she sat in hers. When the lab door opened and Arathon ducked through it, there was no other word. He had to fold himself down to fit through a door built for humans. Sora turned her head. She looked at Arathon for exactly 2 seconds. Then she got off her chair, crossed the lab, and pressed herself against Darian's leg. The room went very quiet. Arathon stared. For a Drakari, a species that Darian had read extensively about, a species known for perfect emotional control, the expression that crossed Arathon's face was remarkable. It was surprise. Pure, unguarded, complete surprise. "What?" Arathon said, very carefully, "has this human done?" "He feeds her," Voss said, "and works with her. That is more or less it." "That is not what I mean." Arathon's golden eyes were fixed on Sora, who had not moved from Darian's side. "What she has just done, she has placed herself against him. In the traditional posture. She has declared him her anchor." Darian looked down at Sora. Sora looked up at him. Her eyes told him nothing he could read clearly, but she did not move away. "I do not know what that means," Darian said. "It means," Arathon said slowly, like someone walking across ice they are not certain will hold, "that she has chosen you as her bonded protector. It is not a gesture a Drakari makes lightly. It is not a gesture a Drakari hatchling has made to a non-Drakari in recorded history." The silence after that was very long. "What did you do?" Voss said quietly to Darian. "I sat next to her," he said. Voss looked at him, then at Arathon, then at the small golden-green dragon pressed against a human's leg in a research station lab on a frontier world. Arathon was quiet for a long moment. He was looking at Sora with an expression Darian could not fully name. Not anger, not warmth. Something complicated that sat between them. "I require 48 hours, Arathon said finally. "For what?" Voss asked. "To determine what this means, and what must be done about it." He looked at Darian directly for the first time. "You will not remove her from the station. You will not allow her to leave with anyone else. You will continue exactly as you have been." Darian blinked. "You are telling me to keep doing what I was already doing?" "Yes. I can do that." Arathon turned and left the lab. The temperature in the room felt like it rose by 3 degrees when he was gone. Petra appeared in the doorway 30 seconds later with a protein block in her hand, looked at Sora still pressed against Darian's leg, and said, "I heard the big one arrive from the canteen. Is everyone all right?" "Yes," Darian said. "No," Voss said. Petra set the protein block on the bench near Sora and left without asking further questions. Sora did not eat it immediately. She stayed where she was, pressed against Darian's leg, and stared at the door Erathon had walked out of. Her tail was still flat, still pressed against the floor. Darian put his hand down. Very carefully, very gently. He rested it on her head, between the small curved horns that were just beginning to grow in. She let him. He left his hand there and stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out what, exactly, he had accidentally become. It was the second night of Erathon's stay. The station had gone quiet the way stations do late at night. Not silent, but reduced. The hum of the air systems, the distant tick of the water filtration doing the thing maintenance kept saying was normal. Darian was in the lab, not because he had planned to stay, but because he had kept finding reasons not to leave. Sora had been restless all evening. She had moved from her chair to the floor to the windowsill and back again. She had not tapped his notes. She had not eaten. She had just moved and stopped and looked at the door and moved again. At the 3rd hour of the night, she stopped in the middle of the lab. She looked at Darian for a long time. Then she flicked her tail once, toward the door, a clear, deliberate gesture, and walked out. He followed her. She led him through 3 corridors, down a maintenance stairwell, and into Cargo Bay 7 at the far end of the station. It was empty. The lights were dim and blue at that hour, and the shadows between the stacked equipment crates were deep and still. Sora walked to the center of the bay. She turned to face him, and then she spoke. "I have been deciding," she said, "for a very long time." Her voice was quiet and clear. Her galactic standard was perfect. Not the halting speech of someone learning a language, not the careful pronunciation of someone translating. Fluent, natural, like she had been speaking it her entire life and had simply chosen not to let anyone hear. Darian said nothing. He sat down on a crate, because his legs felt like they needed to do something, and he waited. "Deciding if you were safe," she said. "Deciding if this was another trap. Deciding if I would make things worse by speaking, or if I would make things worse by staying silent." She looked at him steadily. "I have decided." "Okay," he said. "I am going to tell you the truth. All of it. And then you are going to decide what to do with it. And whatever you decide, I will not blame you for it. That is the agreement I am making with you." "I agree to that," he said. Sora was quiet for a moment. Then she began. Her name was not just Sora. She had a full Drakari name, 7 syllables long, that carried the lineage of her clutch all the way back to the founding records of the Drakari sovereignty. She was the last living egg of that clutch. She was the daughter of the Drakari sovereign, the ruler whose death, 3 months ago, had been recorded in official compact records as a sudden illness. It had not been an illness. The sovereign had been killed. The entire royal clutch had been destroyed in one night. Every egg, every hatchling, every record of succession, gone. Except for one egg that a loyalist named Darren had hidden in a cargo container and carried onto a salvage ship with his own body as the only guarantee of her safety. Darren had not survived the journey. Sora had. She had been in that crate for 11 days when it arrived on Orin 9. She had known, from the moment the crate opened and she saw Darian's face, that she was in a human research station and not a Drakari facility. She had made the decision then: do not speak. Do not reveal intelligence. Do not let anyone know what you are until you understand who sent them. Because someone had sent Erathon, and she did not know yet if it was a friend or an enemy. Darian was quiet for a long moment after she stopped speaking. "You spent months," he said slowly, "pretending to be a traumatized hatchling." "Yes." "While following me to breakfast and correcting my lab notes with your tail." "I had to do something," she said. "You kept making the same error in your soil sample analysis." He looked at the ceiling. He breathed in. He breathed out. "Who sent Erathon?" he asked. "I do not know for certain," she said. "Erathon himself may be loyal. Or he may be working for the faction that killed my family without knowing it. Or he may know exactly what he is doing. I cannot tell yet. That is the problem." "If you are who you say you are," Darian said carefully, Then the Drakari sovereignty has been under false leadership for 3 months. Yes. And if Arathon takes you back to the home system before that is known, then I do not come back, she said simply. The cargo bay was very quiet. The filtration unit ticked somewhere in the walls. The blue night lights hummed. Darian looked at the small golden-green dragon standing in the center of the empty bay, and he thought about the 11 days she had spent in a sealed crate, and the 3 days she had spent in a corner without moving, and the 26 days she had spent sitting near him and saying nothing while she watched and listened and decided. Can you prove it? He asked. Your identity. Is there a genetic record, something the compact holds independently? Yes, she said. The Compact Office of Succession maintains sealed genetic records for all sovereign lines. It was a reform from 60 years ago. The record cannot be altered by any single government, including the Drakari. He nodded slowly. He was already thinking ahead, the way he thought through a problem in the lab, step by step. What do we know? What do we need? What is the path from one to the other? Then we need to reach the Compact Office before Arathon's 48 hours are up, he said. Sora looked at him for a moment that felt longer than it was. You believe me, she said. Not quite a question. Yes, he said. Just like that. You corrected my soil sample analysis 17 times, he said. I was not going to stop trusting your judgment now. Something shifted in her face that he did not have a word for yet. He thought, later, that it might have been relief, the kind that is so big and so long held that when it finally comes out, it looks almost like pain. Okay, she said quietly. Then we should go talk to Director Voss. Voss listened to all of it without interrupting. She sat behind her desk with both hands flat on the surface, which Darian had learned was her way of keeping herself from reacting too fast. She looked at Sora. She looked at Darian. She looked at the wall for a moment. Then she said, How long until Arathon's 48 hours are done? 19 hours, Darian said. And his second ship? Darian blinked. His what? Voss pulled up her NAV display and turned it to face them. There was Arathon's vessel at docking port 2. And there, just outside the station's immediate sensor range, holding at a distance that was just barely legal, was a second ship. Larger. No identification filed. It arrived 4 hours ago, Voss said. It has not contacted us. It has not identified itself. It is just sitting there. Sora looked at the display for a long moment. Her tail was flat against the floor again. That is not a diplomatic escort, she said. No, Voss agreed. It is not. The three of them were quiet together for a moment, which was the kind of quiet that comes right before people start making decisions they cannot take back. Voss said, Tell me what you need. Darian had thought about this in the corridor on the way here. Sora's genetic record. We need to file a formal request to the Compact Office of Succession, an identity verification request. Once that request is in the system, Compact law requires a hold on any transfer of the named individual until verification is complete. How long does verification take? For a sovereign line record, they are required to respond within 72 hours. That gives us more time than we have right now, Voss said. It also means the moment the request is filed, the Compact knows something is being disputed. They will send an observer. Voss was quiet for a moment. Observers carry neutral arbitration status. No party can legally act against another in the presence of a Compact observer without triggering a full tribunal. Yes, Darian said. So what you are telling me, Voss said, is that if we file that request in the next hour, we can pin Arathon in place with paperwork long enough for the Compact to show up. That is what I am telling you. Voss looked at Sora. Can you give us the information needed for the request? Your full succession name, your clutch registry, your genetic line identifier. Sora gave them everything. She recited it without hesitation, 7 syllables of her full name, the clutch registry number, the date of her hatching, the identifier code that tied her genetic record to the Compact's sealed archive. She said it all once, clearly, and then waited while Darian typed it into the request form. Voss reviewed it. She made 2 small corrections to the form formatting. Then she looked at Darian. You understand, she said, that if we file this, we are formally contesting a Drakari authority action. We are a research station with 40 people, no weapons, and a shield system that is rated for debris and solar weather. I know, Darian said. The second ship out there is sitting just inside the range where they can make a move before anyone else gets here. I know that too. And you still want to do this? Darian looked at Sora. She was watching him, not asking him for anything, just watching, the way she had watched him from that corner in the quarantine bay on the very first day. Steady, patient, holding more than she showed. File it, he said. Boss filed it. The response from the compact office came back in 11 minutes. A record, possibly because the name in the request triggered an automatic flag that someone in the compact archive had set long ago, waiting for exactly this situation. The response confirmed. Genetic verification request received. Processing initiated. All transfer orders on the named individual are suspended pending completion. And then, for minutes after that, the compact observer beacon lit up on the NAV display. A vessel already in the system, a standard compact monitoring ship that circled Orin 9 sector on a 3-week rotation, had received the flag and was moving toward the station. 2 hours out. Arathon came to the command bay 30 minutes after the filing. He already knew. He stood in the doorway and looked at the display and then at Voss, and his expression was the most complicated thing Darian had ever seen on a face with scales. You have invoked compact succession law, Arathon said. We have filed a legal identity verification request, Voss said calmly. That is a right available to any individual or their designated representative under compact charter. We have simply exercised it. You did this with a form, he said. We did this with the correct form, Voss said. Properly filled. Submitted through the right channel. With a valid record identifier. She paused. We also filed a secondary notice of unusual vessel presence within proximity range of a civilian research station. That one went to Compact Traffic Authority. Standard procedure. Arathon stared at her. Outside, through the small viewport in the corner of the command bay, the second ship had stopped its approach and was holding position. The compact observer beacon was getting closer. 19 people were standing in the corridors and doorways of the command section. Station crew, scientists, technicians, the Velhari tech, who had once requested a transfer just to get away from a small dragon. They had all come, quietly, without being asked, and they were just standing there. Present. Accounted for. Arathon looked at the crew. He looked at Voss. He looked at Darian and Sora. You held a Drakari authority action, he said slowly. With paperwork. We held it with the right paperwork, Petra said from somewhere near the back. There is a difference. Nobody laughed. But the tension shifted, just slightly, into something that was still serious but felt less like a cliff edge. Arathon was quiet for a long time. Then he stepped back from the doorway. I will wait for the observer, he said. He left. Sora, who had been sitting at Darian's feet through all of it, put her head against his knee. He put his hand on her head. The observer ship got closer. They waited. The observer's name was Rael, and she was a Velhari, tall, silver-gray, with the kind of calm that came not from distance but from having seen enough things that very little surprised her anymore. Arathon met with Rael for 3 hours behind closed doors. Darian did not know what was said. He spent those hours in the lab with Sora, who had gone very still in the particular way that meant she was thinking hard about something. He did not interrupt. He made notes. He read old data. He let her think. When Arathon came out of the meeting with Rael, he looked different. Not smaller. Nothing could make a full Drakari look small. But something in the way he was carrying himself had changed. Like a door that had been locked for a long time had been opened, and he was not yet sure if that was a good thing. He came to the lab. Sora watched him from her chair. She did not move toward him. She did not move away. Arathon looked at her for a long moment. Then he lowered himself to the floor, slowly, deliberately, until his head was level with hers. It was the most startling thing Darian had seen him do. A full adult Drakari, ancient and enormous, making himself smaller on purpose. He spoke to Sora in Drakari then. Darian did not understand the words, but he watched Sora's face, and he saw the moment something in her changed, a tightening around the eyes, and then a slow release, like the letting go of a breath held for months. She answered him, also in Drakari. Her voice was different in that language than it was in Galactic Standard, deeper, slower, more careful, like she was handling each word the way you handle something old and valuable. They spoke for a while. Darian stayed in his chair and did not move. When they were done, Arathon stood back up and looked at Darian. She told me what you did, he said. I did not do very much, Darian said. You sat with her, Erathon said, when no one else would. When she had nothing to offer and no way to explain herself. You sat with her and treated her like a person. He was quiet for a moment. In Drakari culture, there is a concept. I do not know if your language has a clean word for it. It means, the one who holds space. The one who stays when staying costs something. Darian thought about the cold drink he had set on the shelf in the cargo bay on the very first morning. The 40 minutes he had spent sitting in a quarantine bay that smelled like recycled air, reading soil sample data to a dragon who had not moved. It did not cost very much, he said. That is the point, Erathon said. It never does, to the person doing it. But to the one it is done for, it is everything. The genetic verification came back from the compact office in 61 hours. Positive match. Full confirmation. Sora was exactly who she said she was. The second ship outside the station did not wait to hear the result. It jumped away from the system 6 hours before the verification arrived, which told Rael everything she needed to know about who had sent it and why. She filed her own report. The Compact's investigation into the Drakari sovereign's death began officially 2 days later. Erathon stayed. Not at the station. He returned to the Drakari home system to do the work that needed to be done there, the difficult, careful work of uncovering 3 months of false governance and beginning the process of restoration. But he came back, twice, in the weeks that followed. He came to see Sora. He came to see her speak, openly, freely, without hiding, and Darian thought that whatever it meant for a Drakari to feel something like relief, Erathon felt it each time he watched her. Sora was placed under formal compact protected witness status, which meant she stayed on Orin 9 until the home system was stable enough for her to return safely. Nobody gave a timeline. Nobody knew how long it would take. She seemed fine with this. She kept correcting Darian's lab notes. She started teaching Petra 3 words of Drakari per week in exchange for extra protein blocks, a transaction both of them seemed to find deeply satisfying. She learned to fold a standard paper square into a shape that no one on the station could identify, but that she found extremely funny, and she left them on people's desks without explanation. Rael stayed too, longer than was technically required. She told Darian it was for the ongoing observation of the case. He suspected she just liked the station. One afternoon, in the last hour of the day's shift, Rael came to find Darian in the lab. She sat down across from him with the practiced ease of someone who has held difficult conversations as a profession. I need to ask her something, Rael said. For the official record. I hope you do not mind if I ask it here. Ask, Sora said from her chair, not looking up from the data screen she was reading. Rael folded her hands on the table. When you were ready to speak, to reveal who you were, why did you choose to reveal it to a human? Of all the species on this station, of all the species in the compact. Sora was quiet for a moment. She turned away from the screen. She looked at Darian, then at Rael. Because he already knew I was a person, she said. He just did not know what kind. The lab was quiet after that. Outside the small window, Orin 9's sun was setting over a landscape that was wild and unhurried, orange light moving through yellow grasses. 2 weeks later, in an unannounced ceremony in the xenobiology lab with Voss and Petra and Rael and most of the station crew standing in the doorway, Darian and Sora made the anchor bond formal. It was a short ceremony by Drakari standards. Erathon attended by long-range comm. He said something in Drakari at the end that made Sora close her eyes and lift her chin, and Darian did not know the words, but he understood from the way she looked that they were important. The Compact's formal registry updated that evening. Under Darian Cole's record, in the field for interspecies bonds, a new line appeared. It was the first of its kind in the history of the registry. The clerks who processed it apparently spent 40 minutes arguing about whether the form even had the right category for it. It read, Anchored to Drakari Air. Confirmed. Voluntary. Permanent. Sora read the entry over his shoulder, on her chair beside his, in the quiet of the late evening with the station humming around them. They spelled your name right, she said. They did, he said. She went back to reading. He went back to his notes. Outside, the night settled over Orin 9, slow and wide and full of stars.